Okay. Well, good morning again, and it's a great honor, privilege to welcome you, welcome our speakers and our guests, uh, and uh, from the UN Geneva also have joined us, and our online followers. Uh, it's been a this is our gathering today comes at the end of a course. It's the 19th training course of Malta training course, and it's a wonderful day to see you at the end of the course. But it's also sad because we will be saying goodbye to you at the same time. After this, we got to know you, and we made your friendship, and hope that this is the beginning and not the end of seeing you here with us and having met you. And this, at the end of this course, has been the convention of our managing director to have a seminar uh, in, at the end of the training course, in a way to remind us that this is the beginning and not the end. And in fact, that she chose uh, the title of this meeting, From Promises to Practice. Maybe we were with you in promises. We're looking forward to our new relationship, which will be in practice. Thank you to the speakers who are going to be with us. And I would like also to take this opportunity to thank the mentors of this course. If you just give us 1 second and put your hand up so that we can see you. Thank you very much for all your effort and what you can do. And I think our managing director and dean of our academy has chosen the promises to practices addressing the disconnect between global ocean goals and effective implementation. I was talking to my dear colleague from the UN from Geneva, and we kind of reviewed yesterday our history. He wasn't born when I joined UNCTAD, but we're still, we continue to address this disconnect that's also impacting on our ocean and the life of the ocean. So thank you to you all for organizing this event at the end of the course. And I must also mention here our gratitude to our patron of IOI, Nicholas Gelke, who has helped us all along and made this possible. And I hope you will enjoy very much the seminar. Thank you. May I?
Thank you very much. So, good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So you in the hall today, but also to the many people who have joined us online in the meantime, because as I would like simply to add a note to Auni's very warm welcome this morning. This seminar also forms part of the IOI's continuous engagement with its alumni worldwide and with other early career ocean practitioners. So this is actually the 4th seminar in our continuous professional development programs in 2024. And I think this seminar culminates a long series of discussions we've had with you all throughout the year. So without further ado, I would like to proceed to our first fireside chat. Today, first of all, thank you very much for accepting this invitation, maybe challenge, I don't know, to our three panelists, and to share with us not only your expertise, but also your insights, which you have gleaned by your active participation in events throughout this year. We have a diverse panel today, and this reflects also, in a sense, a small snapshot of the state of play in this outgoing year. The optimists among us, at least, we set out with great expectations at the beginning of this year and high hopes to reach a number of goals. The deep seabed mining, the climate COP, and so many other important meetings which were held over this year. The pessimists out there might say they were realists at the end of the day, right? And I think we do feel a small sense of disappointment. Maybe we had higher expectations. So with our panelists today, I would like to explore this. So with me today, I have and welcome engineer Abigail Kotaya. She's the CEO of the first climate change authority in Europe. Well done. Within the Ministry for the Environment, Energy and Regeneration of the Grand Harbour in Malta. Professor Alan Daydoun is a marine biologist by training. He's Malta's Ocean Ambassador, and he's the director of the Malta Training Center of the IOI, which was also responsible for providing the training course, which Auni referred to as just concluding. And finally, Professor Margaret Manjon is an associate professor and director at the Edward de Bono Institute for Creative Thinking and Innovation at the University of Malta. So thank you, all of you, for making the time to be here and to share your experiences. So, question time now. Abigail, I'm going to quote for the IISD reportage on the COP29 conference in Baku, and I'd like your opinion. So, the Paris Agreement was certain people have been going on for a whole year working towards this COP. Because obviously once something is decided at COP or undecided at COP, it needs another year to open its chapter again. Us as a ministry and us as Malta were on the front running lead negotiating adaptation, not NCQG, which was the thing or the factor which was most of a priority, which was obviously the climate funding towards developing countries. But I'm going to speak from two fronts. Malta is considered to be a developed country because of the framework of the EU. But in truth, we are also facing the same realities as the developing countries because of our size, because of us being a small island state. We are very much susceptible to climatic conditions and climatic changes. So we could, I think, as Malta, we were bringing to the table the realities of small island developing states. And that was a perspective which was very much needed throughout the negotiations which we were having. Was the outcome what we desired? I'm supposed to speak from the adaptation, not from the climate finance part. I think from the adaptation, there was much more to be desired because we felt as a country that we focused so much on the new quantified, the new collective quantified goal and the financing part that we lost sight of the mitigation, of the adaptation, which are part of the game as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can't have just a fund, a very huge fund, which ultimately is very hard to achieve if you don't have the adaptation and mitigation well in place. So all ties together. And I think that was the main difference I felt. Maybe the commitment of all the countries coming together to truly affect the change that we need collectively.
Yes, yes. I mean, fair enough. It was always labeled the finance COP. So I think that already sort of set a very high bar to overcome. But
yes, in previous COPs, there you always have
a label.
that particular label, but then you can't lose foresight of the other matters, or else you lose foresight of the main focus, because everything ties in together. Because what is finance without having the right capabilities to adapt? I mean,
yes, it's a good point that you made here, and I really appreciate bringing this to this audience, not to lose sight of the linked goals that we need to tackle simultaneously without favoring or disfavoring one or another. Thank you very much for your insight, Abigail. Now, Alan, you are rightly concerned and following the deep seabed mining. And of course, most of our audience knows this, but I'll redefine it briefly. Deep seabed mining is often defined as a potential commercial industry attempting to mine mineral deposits from the seafloor in the hopes of extracting commercially viable minerals. Many times, this is portrayed as the way to power and resource the green transition and as a potential future star activity of the blue economy. We know life is not that straightforward, is it? In your view, why is it so important to implement, at least not indefinitely, a moratorium on any seabed mining activities in the high seas? Seabed mining has been on our agenda all this year, right?
Thank you, Antonella. Welcome to everyone. I'm really happy to have the opportunity, obviously, to speak about something which, as you know, is very much to my heart, you know. And why is it so? Because we're speaking about the deep ocean. We're practically speaking about more than half the planet. Whenever you see the news about some major environmental disaster, you know, obviously people get concerned that the Amazon is burning, you know, or coral reefs are bleaching and so on. But spatially, these pale in contrast to what is on the agenda, what is on the plate when it comes to the deep sea. The deep sea makes up 55%, 60% of the globe. So we should be concerned. This should be the number one, issue on the agenda, obviously linked very much with climate change. So why should we have at least a temporary moratorium? The way I see it, my answer will be twofold. First of all, the uncertainty, the lack of knowledge that there is. What do I mean? We have sent, for example, more people, on the surface of the moon. We have sent actually three times the amount of people on the surface of the moon than we've sent people to the bottom of the ocean. I think at the moment we've mapped around 30 to 35% of the deep sea. There is the deep sea initiative to map it all by 2030. But even when we get there, in order to rush things, they're mapping it not in fine detail, but at large scale, not it's like zooming out. So again, even by 2030, we won't have all that information. And most of us are familiar with what we call the proportional principle. Proportional principle, which is at the heart of environmental management, which places the burden of proof on those who are proposing a new activity about which the science is not mature. And this is the issue with deep sea mining, okay? For example, I have this cartoon in mind about the proportional principle that I always use in my lectures to actually introduce this principle. You have two frogs in a frying pan, okay? And one of them wants to stay there and says, prove that we will be boiled alive, okay? And the other guy says, no, we should leave until you can prove we won't be boiled alive. So you see, it's two different viewpoints. Okay, so the industry is telling all those who are opposing deep sea mining. Here we have representatives from the SOA, okay, from the Sustainable Ocean Alliance, who I obviously salute for being so vocal in this debate. There are two different viewpoints. The industry is pointing at all those, I was going to say, is pointing the finger at environmentalists. I don't like the term environmentalist, okay, because of the connotations it has. All of us should be environmentalists, not a class of people who are locked up, who are asocial or whatever, But anyway, and saying, listen, prove that, you should be proving that we are damaging the ecosystem and so on. It should be the other way around, okay? The onus should be on the industry to prove that they won't be damaging. So we need, first of all, a solid, robust framework to have environmental impact assessments in place. In the same way that on land, whenever we build a new road, we build a new airport, we build whatever, you have to conduct an environmental impact assessment. Imagine we're going to send excavators down there in a pristine environment, which has never seen the impact, the footprint of man, and we're not even considering conducting an environmental impact assessment. This is completely crazy, The second point, so the uncertainty was the first one. The second one is what the deep sea bed gives to us in terms of ecosystem services. And this links to climate change, okay? When we tackle this topic, we normally look at it from the biodiversity point of view only. That is very valid, obviously, and I'm a marine biologist, so I would be the last one to downplay the importance of marine biodiversity, and we're discovering new species every time we go down there. So again, there's a treasure trove waiting, but there's other issues. There's the issue that there's a lot of trapped carbon down there, which will be remobilized as soon as we go and collect those nodules, polymetallic nodules, which, in my opinion, it is this, once it starts, because unfortunately it will start at one point, it will be the most non-renewable resource in the world we are tapping. Why? Because these nodules grow at the rate of a few millimeters per 1,000 years. So whenever you have a nodule this big, you have millions and many millions of years in your hand. So there's no time this will be replenished, okay? So there's a lot of stored carbon, which will be obviously recirculating, remobilizing and making that carbon available once again. And eventually, we're speeding up the carbon cycle in that sense. We are also, there's plenty of contaminants down there which have settled down and been trapped there, and we are obviously recirculating them. And there's also impact on water quality. Imagine, what they're going to do is pump up the sludge, get what they need, pump back the sludge without the nodules at mid-water, not putting it down back on the seabed, not at the surface, in mid-water. This is fine sediment which has being there without currents, without the influence of currents, without the influence of humans, very fine. It will remain suspended for many, many years and even travel, and finish with this point. If you look at where they want to start deep sea mining, it's basically in one of the most remote places on Earth, what we call the CCZ, okay, Clarion-Clipperton Zone. The closest land is Hawaii. Okay, the closest land is Hawaii. So just imagine, having a bloom of turbid water, moving, entering the waters of other countries, of other territories, which are not interested in deep sea mining, So yes, I think to conclude, we should be speaking much more about deep sea mining, because unfortunately, it's not a topic so far which is making mainstream headlines. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I knew when I asked you that question, we would get an exhaustive answer and a very persuasive one. So
Touches a nerve.
yes. We're on the same side over here, right? We need to know more about this. So, Margaret, thank you for being here. And again, I picked some quotes from the reportage on Baku, because this struck me as a very important observation. So, in the analysis of the Baku meeting, I detected these quotes. Trust will be needed. Social equity has proven difficult. If the COP outcomes, underscored parties' divides in knitting together human rights and climate change. So this aspect of maybe could it be a failure of imagination to understand how such environmental and such decisions or lack of decisions impact human nature? With such diverse views and priorities, we see this in these big meetings. How can individuals feel empowered to move towards a shift or a creative mindset to approach collaborative problem identification, but solving them as well? What do we need?
Okay. So first of all, good morning. Thank you for having me here. I feel the passion and I feel like I don't know enough. And I'm imagining that like me, there are many, many, many others, which is in a way sad because this affects everyone, So thank you for this.
Thank you.
When we talk about the individual, so here we have to distinguish between the individual, us, or maybe us as citizens, and the individuals, let's say the decision makers. Because we're all individual, but we all have a different agenda. So agendas play a very important part in how decisions are made. And sadly, as we all know, they do not always represent the interests of the masses or of the people. Okay? Now, from a creative perspective, the way we can look at this is perception. So perception is how we interpret the world around us. And we put on different colored glasses depending on what we're looking at and how our baggage, our background, our upbringing conditions the way we interpret matters. Now, from what Alan has said, there's lots of financial interest in the deep sea mining. Usually, if I had to be sitting in the shoes of these people, am I bothered about how this is going to influence communities, societies, Hawaiian people, because they're the first ones who will be receiving the impact of this? Perhaps not, because there are financial targets and it's all about wealth. You mentioned inequalities, and this factors a lot into that. But on the other hand, you also mentioned individual creativity. And when we talk about individual creativity and the creative mindset, there are some who are predisposed, you're born with it. You're a driver and you find solutions in the least possible of places. But it doesn't mean that anyone else doesn't. And you can get trained, you can encourage and ingrain this in the way we do things. I'm a convert myself, I was introduced to creative thinking when I used to be a secondary school teacher, and I was, nah, now I think yes. Because it changes how you look at things. It changes your perception because you make a deliberate effort to think creatively. Okay, very simple. How can I do this differently? And in communities, we can all come together to explore how we can do things differently rather than, I mean, it's much easier to just sit and complain. That's human nature, and we all do it at some point or another. And then there's another very important factor in this, which is agency. It's Christmas time, and in many homes, there's lots of baking going on, and there's lots of baking powder being used. That is the agent that makes your cake nice and fluffy, and it raises the cake. What is it in us that can be that agent to drive us to be more creative? What is it, that agent that can help us to be critical thinkers and say, okay, whatever they've been telling me, is that right? Is that how it is going to affect me? How can I do some of my own thinking to address or to maybe answer any questions that I might have? Because we live in a society which is overloaded with knowledge and information. But we're great at producing more of it, which is what happens at most of these meetings. Lots of reports are written, and then the action steps at the end, and then maybe we'll see them, maybe not. Maybe someone will read the report and maybe not. The agency, so the expectation from us, the many, okay, vis-a-vis, making noise, essentially. And this creative mindset of, yes, I can do something. Yes, I feel empowered to do it. We are not brought up, especially locally, in such a culture where you feel it and you just go ahead and speak up. Okay? Because usually, probably as a previous colony, we used to be told what to do. And there's this expectation that someone will guide us. But we have to question who's guiding. We have to question what the agenda is. I think it's in parallel sometimes with AI. Everyone is saying how good it is for everyone. But what no one says is that it's money driven. There are people investing lots in it, and what the impact of that will be, it will remain to be seen. And probably it's the same thing, it equates with this. So us being the creative agents, we have the power to, I like to look at this as a friendly virus, rub a bit against people and you spread it. They won't get sick, but they will be more empowered to think creatively. So I like to think about it. Does it make some sense?
Yes. In fact, thank you very much for your insight. In fact, it struck a bit of a chord with us because the International Ocean Institute has, since its inception, been a capacity development, training, and education focused NGO. So the question I had in my mind while you were speaking was, in fact, how does development of capacity training, even outreach on ocean and climate literacy, for example, how would this play into your quest to spread this friendly virus of empowerment?
Okay, it's difficult. I wasn't prepared for this one. Okay?
I drew a curveball, sorry.
No, actually, to be honest, I was really happy to receive this invitation because for some, creativity equates with the arts and with all things nice. But it doesn't necessarily have to be like that. Creativity can be practiced in every single facet of society and business and whatnot. So looking at this creatively, so what can we do? How can we come up with new solutions to address the problems? That is perhaps for me a gift, because there is this recognition that we can be practical thinkers. Now, in relation to courses, outreach, we speak a lot. We're a team of 5, okay? So don't think that we're many. We're a team of 5 ladies. But we speak up and we are ingrained in the, let's say, international community in terms of creativity. We try to go for outreach. So this is one here this morning. But maybe we can consider future collaborations with your institute to see how we can take it further and engage in creative thinking sessions.
It would be another another
Actually-
tool in their arsenal. right?
Actually, there might be, okay, there's World Creativity and Innovation Week, which is celebrated every April. And this year, the theme is water.
Very
So we can, if you're all going home, we can even do something online. And
Water. Okay, salt water.
well, it's
All
water.
sorts of
Water, it's water. It's water, but
Thank
it
you.
makes up, 55%, as you said, of whatever we breathe and eat.
Correct. We really are part of this planet, and we mustn't forget that, I think. So
Take
thank
it
you
for
very
granted,
much.
I think.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you another question, Abigail. So, bearing upon what we've just said now, and even what Alan said earlier, climate and ocean physics are inextricably interlinked, right? You're an engineer, we all have some background, but also, of course, the corresponding impact and interaction on the entire biosphere of this Earth, including humans, including ourselves. How do you see this interlinkage being addressed within the future of global climate talks? What are some of the biggest gaps here that we need to collectively address to make progress?
Okay, so obviously it's a very wide.
Yes, I'm giving you a lot of leeway.
No, but basically to split it down into concrete terms, and also to link it with what I do actually, with policy and with instigating that policy and affecting that policy, because a policy, establishing policies, legislation, strategies, and just leaving them laying there would not eventually or would not effectively lead us to the change that we need. But obviously, first of all, I personally think that oceans and the ocean talk is a little bit of a not so common discussion. We I think sometimes we forget that we are living also in an ecosystem with land and sea. Because we focus so much on land, on the renewable energy, which we can actually contribute and which we can actually shift to on land, always on land, on land, on land, that we sometimes forget also that we have a potential of a blue carbon ecosystem. And I think, especially in Malta, I know that you're coming from different countries, but in Malta being an island state, the potential that we have is humongous. It's enormous. In Malta, obviously, as you know, because you were also living here for a short period of time as well, you can actually feel that the amount of landscaping, the amount of not urbanization, the amount of rural spaces which we have are limited. It's not like going abroad and you can have, I don't know, carbon sinks, because you can actually invest in forestry and areas which can actually help you enable the offsetting of the carbon emissions. But we have a very, I think, important asset, which is the ocean. And I think one of the main things that authority tries to incorporate is linking science-based solutions with also the policy frameworks. Because sometimes I think that governments and the public sector, and sometimes even the private sector, but governments tend to do it even more, they tend to kind of compartmentalize themselves from academia. Academia are doing the studies, the research, but then the policy is not necessarily linked to the science-based measures. And what we try to do, and I think even Alan can vouch for this, is, because he's also on our council, is that we established a council full of experts. They're really total, all of them are experts in the field, to truly link that research-based innovation to the actual policy framework and policy making. Have we arrived? No, we're still in our infancy, but we're trying to bridge that gap. I think something which is missing a lot are the NDCs and the contributions, the national determined contributions, and the link towards the blue
obviously economy and the seas. I think, and I strongly believe that similar to having indices for, I don't know, for renewable energy on land, we should have indices for matters which are in relation to blue carbon and to the blue economy as well. As an authority, to go back to from where I am, we are actually seeking also to establish not just studies, but also how we can actually enable this blue carbon potential, because there's a lot under seas, which we're not really focused on. And I think even though there is research, there's a lot to be there's much more research which needs to be done in order for the policymaker to truly invest over there as well. So we'll be doing that. With regards to the gaps, obviously these are all gaps that I am mentioning, but now it's also, there's also a very thin puzzle which I'm missing here, and that is the equity and also the fairness. That obviously all of this shouldn't put the most vulnerable in jeopardy of this transition. And as we're saying, the people in Hawaii obviously most likely are going to be very susceptible to these changes. Small island developing states are susceptible to these changes. So through all of this transition and progress, we can't leave the most vulnerable behind. So there needs to be this consistency and this assessment so that everything works in a whole ecosystem, to mention what I was saying before. So that's a very simplistic way of how to say it. Obviously, it's very complex, but even as an authority, first of all, I really was amazed by the interest of the people. I mean, normally I used to speak to other authorities and they would tell me, listen, I'm finding it very, very hard to find people, but there was a very big interest. Why? Most likely because there was a lack of opportunity in policy making when it comes to climate action. So that gives me hope. We're at the moment recruiting as well at a very fast pace. So we need more people like you who are actually experts in the field to truly affect this transition, I think.
Thank you for your answer. From it, I note, quite a few principles that we actually deliver to our course attendees throughout the 4.5 weeks that they are here. The idea that policymaking should be underpinned by sound science. And another principle which is quite important to the IOI, which is the principle of equity and just transition. So this harks back to our early history, which was a focus on that. And also the idea of interdisciplinarity and that wide view. You mentioned compartmentalized thinking, which unfortunately does happen a lot. And also the idea of innovative thinking, which Meg brought up, and precautionary principles. So slowly throughout our discussion, all of us, we are really getting a few strong points out there. I think you also mentioned that even though we could do always with having more science, we could do always with having more data, I think we have enough to act right now, right? Okay, so thank you. Alan, we all know that you're a passionate oceanographer and a dedicated educator over and above everything else that you do. And we know that you spearhead as well a number of ocean literacy and citizen science endeavors, projects, locally and within the region. In your experience now, as a scientist, how and why should scientific research be better integrated into national and even larger scale governance frameworks to close this knowledge action gap that we're seeing?
So I think the major reason for this is that we're living in the age of misinformation, unfortunately. So fact, coming here, I was telling Abigail I was literally answering somebody on social media, about the climate change denial and skepticism and so on. And you would be amazed that even though we are facing this climate crisis, the scale of denial, in my opinion, is increasing. So, and this links a bit as well with shifts, with political shifts as well in Europe and in the US and so on, But so yes, we need obviously to have faith in science and to promote this faith in science out there. Otherwise, we cannot have any hope of actually making it. And you mentioned some of the campaigns that we lead. Most of these campaigns revolve around citizen science. Citizen science and the University of Malta and the IOI work very closely on citizen science. Citizen science is one of those, in my opinion, incredible tools because if properly managed and implemented, citizen science can lead to a two-way traffic in the sense that, you get citizen scientists contributing, reports about anything, could be alien species, jellyfish, whatever, microplastics. These are the thematics that we address in Malta, but there are citizen science campaigns about everything out there, okay? And so they are collecting valuable data for the scientists, but at the same time, scientists is giving information back to the citizen scientists, so it's a way of popularizing science. That is the major advantage I see of citizen science, not just the collection of data. The collection of data is obviously useful for us scientists. For example, I cannot aspire to be able to monitor, I don't know, jellyfish blooms or alien species in our waters if it wasn't for the citizen science campaigns, because at the end of the day, you cannot be everywhere all the time. So you need eyes and ears everywhere, But coming back to your question, so citizen science is one of the ways that we can popularize science. And popularizing science in this day and age is becoming more and more critical because of all the misinformation we're getting out there. And this is this is very dangerous because there seems to be agendas, not just somebody who's reading fake information, but there are people producing this fake information on purpose, And so we need to be, and this ties very much to what you were saying about critical thinking. So we need to have the tools to be able to discriminate between the fake, the false, the incorrect, and the scientifically, proven and so on. Even this thing with sea level rise, people saying, but the sea is rising, but by just a few millimeters, at most few centimeters. A rise of a magnitude of 50 centimeters is significant. So it cannot be downplayed. 50 centimeters 50 centimeters will displace many people. It will lead to a lot of environmental refugees. No wonder Malta raised sea level rise on the United Nations Security Council agenda. So, we're not realizing that these are issues which are of global security magnitude. And I think it was Sir David Attenborough, I like his words, where he says, people will only protect what they appreciate, and they will only appreciate what they understand. So it's useless telling people, listen, we have to do this to mitigate climate change. We have to do this. First, we have to communicate science to them, not just to students, to young generation in schools, because it's useless giving kids the information, then they go back home and they find a lot of skepticism out there from their parents. So this has to be across the board, and all of us need to be good communicators, good ambassadors. And you might say, but I don't have the opportunity. I don't run a citizen science campaign. I'm not in the media. You can do it from the comfort of your home on social media. So whenever you see something which is not correct, factually correct, okay, you say, listen, and even if you link it to some, rigorous, respectable portal, which is validated and so on, you say, listen, you should be reading this. And there are these respectable portals which are producing, which are generating and providing information. And so I think, yes, we need to fight this good fight, against misinformation.
Thank you very much, Alan. We have just a few minutes left, so I'll give you my last question, Margaret.
The quick.
Yes, thank you. Maybe we'll have a chance for a question from the floor. With respect to institutions and decision-making bodies, just to take our question up one layer, if you wish, how can creative thinking be applied to overcome entrenched barriers in, well, ocean governance, but not just, and inspire these solutions? I know you and Alan had spoken along these lines in your earlier answers. So,
Okay, so when we're talking about governing bodies, they're there to represent the people. I'll go back to the people because ultimately there are more of us than governing bodies. So there is an element of responsibility there. But tying to what Alan was saying earlier, there is, I like to use the word alienation. Okay, we live in an age of alienation. We are too busy thinking about what is important for me. And the collective, sadly, is, disintegrating. And this goes to show locally, for example, if you go and see who volunteers, I mean, the number of younger volunteers is, dwindling. And that is the backbone of a healthy society. So if we had to look at this from the perspective of governance, one of the issues with creative thinking there would be that there are a number of agendas. There are a number of, let's say, respectable people who have their own self-respect as well. And sometimes, let's say, we're a bit egocentric and we would want to push our agenda forward, and we might not be able to listen and properly evaluate what someone else might be saying. And that goes down to basic communication skills. If we had to think about creative thinking, you need discipline to do it, especially in a group. The late Professor De Bono had tried to do it in Parliament once. But this would take you suspending judgment. Anyone in a governing body is suspending judgment. So whatever I think, whatever my baggage is in relation to something, and you try to think in parallel, so untangling, because most of discussions, we have all had meetings of some sort or another, and you know that you go in, there's an agenda, but you hardly ever go through it all because you end up discussing. And when we discuss, we move away from our objective. And the further away you move from the objective, then you're literally wasting time. So what we do with creative thinking is we unpack and we try to focus on one piece of information at a time. So that we think in parallel. So for example, if we're evaluating, we're not evaluating everything at the same time, but you look at what's beneficial for some time. So everyone thinks about what's beneficial for, say, 5 minutes, and we make notes. Then you shift. So there is this literally mental shift. Okay, what's problematic? What could be a difficulty? And you focus on that. And then you move on to the other, because that would avoid discussion, which is what we're very good at, but still drives us very far away from the goal. One other issue with governing bodies is that sometimes they are distant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, at the moment I am working on a concept which I call civic creativity, because I think that there is a lot of it. And there's the need in this world where we're finally realizing that we would like a better future. Maybe a bit late, but anyway. But there is the need for this creation of civic creativity. But sometimes there is this, I actually have the sheet I'm working on in front of me at the moment. The more higher up in power you tend to be, the more distant very often you are from, let's say, the frontliners, the people who are actually going to
Truth on the ground.
the truth on the ground, and people who are going to suffer, go
Receive
through
the
the
impact.
implications of a decision that is made higher up. And that is where and why creative thinking methods are so necessary, because there you make a stop and say, okay, this is the time to think about the consequences. What will they be? How will they affect? Who are the stakeholders? How can we, it doesn't mean that you will not go through with a project, but how can we mitigate the effects so that at least we'll have the least disastrous impact as possible? So there are lots of things that we can talk about. I think we can have many conversations after this.
I think we should.
Yeah.
I'm seeing actually a pattern coming up in your responses, the idea of communication, the idea of equity, the idea of stakeholder involvement, both as recipients of an action and maybe as people who are able to instigate change. So I can see that our conversations are really coming around. I would like to maybe we have some chance for one question from the floor. So if there is one question from the floor, please, for any of our speakers.
Maybe we should give students. I have a question.
We don't have much time, so we need a quick question, quick decision. Okay, would you please, for the sake of our audience, just give your name and your question clearly? Yes, you should.
My name is Ahmet Kudesh. I'm from Turkey. I'm one of the mentors. I have greatly enjoyed the talk. Really important ideas appeared, like precautionary principle and all those things. And I have learned as well how bad deep sea mining. And I will come to this blue economy word. Blue economy is any economics you are getting from the sea. And we are thinking, and we say blue, it's a nice thing. But this mining as well is blue economy. And in the end, it's not a nice thing. So do you think we should as well promote the idea blue economy is not always a good thing?
I think only is reaching to reply to this one, so I think we should keep on.
Make my work.
So, but I fully agree with you, and it's all about perceptions. Even the thing with Green Deal, I think the Green Deal is a misnomer, because how can you have a Green Deal without the blue in it? How can you achieve climate neutrality without the ocean? So these are misnomers. So yes.
I think it also reflects the very human trend to shorten and summarize ideas into one or two catchwords. And the reality is everything is nuanced in this world. Everything has pros and cons, and I think that this is where the wisdom comes in, to translate really the science appropriately into policy that has the maximum benefit for the most people. So I think they're making signals to me, right? That, okay, if I may, I gave someone a curveball before, but if I can just throw this last question at our panel. If each of you had to summarize in 4 or 5 words your main message for our audience today, what would you tell them? A quick. Nobody wants that.
I think creatively.
Okay, just a quick one.
I think in all of this, in all of what's happening, I think it's not really that appealing sometimes. What we do is it comes across as not being appealing. But what really drove me into this transition or into this sector is that I keep on believing that my contribution can ultimately benefit not just my generation, but also the people who are coming here before me. So never lose sight of what your focus is, because ultimately, if you lose that sight, we're going to have a bigger problem in the end. I think that is mine.
Thank you very much. Very inspirational, actually, especially for our class and the people listening to us today. Alan.
Now, from my end, I would simply say, convince yourself and then convince others. So, some of us, especially those who might not be in hard-nosed science, might have doubts, and that there's nothing wrong with that. You might have doubts if climate change is real, or if climate change is being driven by men, or if deep sea mining is a bad thing. This is natural. So convince yourself by reading. There's a lot of stuff there, and sift through it. Obviously, be careful of what, as I said, is fake and false and so on. Once you're convinced, then become obviously an agent for change by convincing others, So if everybody convinces, those around him about the truth, okay, I don't want to go there in philosophy about, because truths can be, there's many versions of the truth,
Complicated.
but the truths that we know at the moment, holds, because this might change, but convince others of the need to make this change.
So the idea of educating yourself, but also sharing
Yes.
knowledge with others.
Okay, I
Margaret.
would say that taking off from what Alan said, so change brings fear and discomfort because we're adapting to a new system. But it doesn't have to stop us from trying. So my message would be keep trying and always say, how can I do this differently? So at least without formal creativity training, you are being creative, which I'm sure that you already are, but just make this deliberate and very present. How can I do this differently? And don't be afraid of change, because sometimes, we all forget and we all end up settling, even during COVID we did somehow. So I don't think that, I hope not, any huge curved ball, wild cards, whatever it is, like COVID will show up anytime soon. But, change, and how can we go about it?
Thank you very much to all our panelists. I definitely enjoyed being on the panel, so I thank you on my behalf and of IOI and of all our audience here as well. So now I invite you to take your seats because the next panelists will be joining us at the table. And the next moderator will be Osman Keith. And
Thank you. Thank you.
You were accepted.
Anyway, he was like, sit anywhere, and immediately kicks me out of my seat. So, first of all, I'd like to give a warm welcome to our three speakers today. Thank you for joining us and for sharing your expertise, your experience. Basically, this second chat brings together a blend of perspectives and disciplines as well, highlighting what we hope to be some of the more innovative new approaches being pursued towards the challenges we're facing today in ocean governance. We're moving forward a little bit from the discussions in chat one. As you've seen, there was an exploration of the gap between promises and outcomes. And now we shift our focus a little bit towards the more practical, towards the solutions, towards what is implementable, and hopefully to a pathway to move forward from this disconnect that was highlighted in the first chat. I think you're going to tell us as well that this year has been a mix of both progress and setbacks in ocean governance and climate governance as well, which in a way highlights just how complex the entire environment is. And yeah, but I hope we're going to see that there are avenues to turn what we desire into actions and into implementable solutions. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our speakers. I have with me today Ludovic Arnaud, who is an associate expert with Trade, Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development branch of UN Trade and Development. I have Rosalind Kemp, policy lead with Sustainable Ocean Alliance Malta and an IOI alumnus as well. And as well with me is Conor Savage, the student representative of the IOI Malta course of 2024. So Connor is literally half an hour away from being an alumnus. And
I
he
think it might be
also,
29 minutes actually.
Yeah.
It was close enough.
and he's also a training and mentoring manager for the ECO program. I would like to begin now with our first speaker, Ludovic. As an associate expert with UN trade and development, you are in a unique position to shed light on basically the role of UNCTAD to shape global trade and development policies. And I would like to ask you, how does UNCTAD contribute to the implementation of the ocean goals which were mentioned in Chatham?
First of all, thank you for having UNCTAD here at IOI. It's a real pleasure. And special thanks to Dr. Orny Benham, who has had a distinguished career at UNCTAD. We were just publishing a report right now on the global system of trade preferences, which he helped put together to get this GSTP negotiations forward on specific marine products. With that said, to answer your question, UNCTAD is helping implement the SDG 14 goals through three main pathways. The first one being providing data and research. Since 2022, we have created a database on ocean trade in goods and services. This database allows us to provide recommendations to policymakers, member states, and also in multilateral environmental negotiations like the COPs, the INC negotiations, which just took place in Busan last week, and in the UN Ocean Conference, which we are helping prepare. So just to give you some flavor on the data, last year, trading goods totaled $900 billion and trading services $1.3 trillion. In terms of main exporters, for goods, it was China, the US, and Germany. For services, you see a lot of differences because of flags due to maritime transport, but also there are key players like the US in terms of tourism, maritime tourism. And also to give you some flavor of the policy recommendations. So in terms of trade in ocean goods, 77% is manufacturers, 23% is fisheries and seafood processed. So there's a real opportunity to move towards sectors which have higher value added, green sectors, to get higher value and higher development without hurting the ocean ecosystem. A second key message we have, if we look at small island developing states, SIDS, over 85% of exports of SIDS are ocean services. Less than 15% are ocean goods. And here again is tourism, which plays a key part, as well as transport. This has a huge potential in terms of providing value added, but it also has downsides. If we look at the pandemic, tourism fell by 70%, and SIDS were hardly hit as a result. So the first point, data. We have publications. Abigail mentioned NDCs. We just published a paper on ocean-related measures in NDCs, which I would be happy to share. We have also research going on seaweed, on the ocean economy. All this is being put forward. And the second point, the second big contribution that UNCTAD is trying to put forward for the SDG 14, once we have this data, all this research, we bring it to all those multilateral environmental negotiations, so the Ocean Conference, COP29, COP16 in Cali, the INC negotiations, and here we try to provide a trade for development angle. So making sure that the environment is linked with the development needs of developing economies, which is the main goal, the main mission of UNCTAD. And one third point, but I won't dig too much into it.
Don't worry, I will.
Okay. Helping developing economies ensure that they can promote a sustainable ocean economy. And here we have specific projects in the Caribbean, in partnership with the OECS, with the EU, with CITES, with many organizations to put forward objectives, plans to make sure that those countries can export in a sustainable manner. But I'll talk about that more later.
Thank you very much, Ludwig. I think we're witnessing a bit of a shift from decades ago when data was not accessible. Now we're seeing transparencies and organizations like yours. I think what they're doing is they're bringing this data to light, which is which comes in very handy because not all countries have the data collection possibilities of, for example, advanced economies as well. So you are bridging the gaps in a way. And I think you also highlighted that there's the pathway forward to aligning economic objectives towards the vital conservation that we need for the ocean and beyond. So thank you very much. Building on this, let's shift a little bit our perspective to future ocean leaders. And Rosalind, considering your background, both in economics and ocean governance, coupled with also your recent hands-on experience in marine conservation and youth engagement, in your view, what makes young ocean leaders uniquely positioned to contribute to the effective implementation of ocean goals and commitments?
Well, thanks for letting me be here to speak on this. I think I'd like to first set the current context of what young leaders have been brought about to, and that's we were sort of raised and now we're in a triple planetary crisis. We have witnessed our oceans being depleted and our land being developed unsustainably. So, young ocean leaders have then gone to school to hope to sort of fix these problems. And at the same time, I think in these past few years, there's been a lot of treaties that have been passed, the High Seas Treaty and the 30 by 30 by CBD. And there's a lot of opportunities now as well. So we have ocean leaders who grew up seeing these problems, who went to school to sort of figure out the solutions, and now having these opportunities to be able to sort of work within these frameworks. I see also a lot of growth and uptick in youth involvement in these spaces. There's ECOPS, which has started early career ocean professionals. There's Youth for the Ocean. There's Youth and Environment Europe. There's Sustainable Ocean Alliance. There's many youth organizations trying to get in because there is a gap that needs to be filled. And I kind of want to give an example of what that effective implementation looks like from youth. So I'll speak about one of the SOA has hubs all over the world, and these are youth-led hubs, youth-led initiatives. And one of these hubs is in SOA Zanzibar, and it's led by Rashid Said Ali. And he does amazing work with mangrove restoration. So at the beginning, this was a few years ago, he has background experience, more than 5 years working in mangrove restoration, but wanted to do something himself. Again, young leaders wanting to do something, but not having the platform or the resources or anything to be able to undertake these. So SOA provided him a grant. They planted 1,000 mangroves, also created a steering community with the local community. So now the local community is going to continue to monitor the mangroves over the 2 hectares. I think they have about an 80% survival rate. And so that was the first year of implementation. That's all working with the community. The community is the one that's overseeing it. However, the next year he came back, and restoring the mangroves is one thing, but the mangroves are still being cut down because people are selling them for firewood or using them for their own firewood. They need an income, and so they go and get the firewood. So the next year it says, okay, we're still going to plant more because we need to restore, but also we need to stop the loss that's happening because they're going to continue to be pulled down. So the next year project, they planted again 1,000 mangroves over 2 hectares, but then they also implemented capacity training programs and trained about 60 people and 5 youth on honeykeeping, so they can make honey and get that as an income so that they don't have to continue to cut down firewood. And he gave them beehives. So now they have and he just gave me the calculations, but they've already produced the honey. This project was this year, the project for the honey. They've already produced the honey, gaining income for the local community. And he's already looking to see what they could do next year. So I think with the effective implementation, a lot of things are needed. And I think youth help sort of with the effective implementation because of the way that they operate. With collaboration, they also know their communities. They also know what needs to be done. They bring in stakeholders. They look at the long-term stability of this. And they're doing something that, I mean, it's bottom down, and in most places, these are top down, right? The governments are the ones implementing these, but they're not. And so youth are going in their own communities and saying, how can we implement this? And that's just one case study. There's many, many projects and many youth doing this, things like this all over the world. But I think it really shows effective implementation because it's not just doing a project and leaving it. First, they, had a steering committee that's going to continue, but then also looking back at how can it be improved? How can it be improved? And every year, how can we continue to restore these mangroves and, effectively implement them? So yeah, that's my.
Thank you very much, Rosalind. I think you highlighted that there is the passion and innovation necessary among the young ocean leaders out there. It's just a matter of giving the right tools, allowing for the implementation, evaluation, and then reiteration, which you've just touched upon. I've heard one word in the first chat, and your topic came to mind. Margaret mentioned the overall alienation. And I think this applies a lot to young people as well. And I know I've been reading about the Lie Flat movement, the countries. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I wrote the word alienation as well. I wrote quite a couple of words from her speech because I felt that it was, having agency and doing different things and creativity. I think youth have a lot of that. I think when it comes to the alienation, I think that's why these ECOPs and SOA and everyone is making these networks so youth don't feel as alienated by having themselves and having a network of each other all over the world.
Thank you very much. So it's a matter of going back to community.
Yeah, exactly. Knowing what's in your own local community. If everyone does local, I think we can reach those larger goals.
If only we had someone on the panel who knew a thing or two about communities of ocean practitioners. Connor, you, as someone deeply involved in both science and governance, how do you think integrating these professionals into regional and global frameworks can help implement practical solutions and drive real progress towards sustainability?
Thank you, Cosmin. I think just to start off with, building on the answers we've already heard, as we said, there are a large number of communities out here focused on these goals. We have the Early Career Ocean Professionals Programme underneath the UN Ocean Decade. We have the Sustainable Ocean Alliance, which I'm also involved with, and the IOI. There's quite a wide array of work being done across the board. In terms of the tangibles, though, in why having early career ocean professionals in the room is so beneficial. Firstly, the infusion of fresh ideas and new perspectives. I'm a big believer in strength and diversity. The greater a mix of people in the room, greater the mix of ideas. And I think the programme that I've been lucky enough to be a part of for the past 5 weeks is testament to that. With ECOPs, you typically have those who are early adopters of technology. So exposure to the latest scientific advancements. So another one we've seen on the programme is around AI and the critical role that's playing both today and also will play in the years to come. I do feel like it's typically early career ocean professionals that are out here pushing the envelope forward in terms of what tools we use to tackle the problems that we all universally have. ECOPs, and obviously speaking as an ECOP might be a tad biased in this regard, is I genuinely believe they come up with some of the best ideas that I've come across. The level of creative problem solving and thinking that I see is brilliant. And I think a fantastic example of this is I co-organised an event at the Barcelona conference earlier this year around capacity development. I was lucky enough to have the IOI co-organising as well as some other organisations. And as part of that event, there was a mini hackathon segment to discuss the problems we were facing, solutions that we could have, and it was just absolutely fantastic to hear those conversations and how we move forward and tackle these issues. ECOPS do have our local communities. We're also very, very good at building global ones as well and coming together. So I know the connections between the ECOP program and SOA. I know the connections between the ECOP program and IOI. And it's really about the problems we face, both in governance and the related ocean challenges. We need interdisciplinary collaboration. We need interorganizational collaboration to tackle them. These are issues that are too big for one organization. It's why we have so many of them to deal with it. And coming together at events like this, coming together at, like, for instance, the Barcelona conference, coming together, I hope to see some of you in Nice next year in France, it's building those long-lasting partnerships to tackle these issues together, because that's really the only way we're going to do it, because they are of that scale. That short-term thinking doesn't work here. Bridging gaps between different disciplines. So on the program, we've seen people from industry, academia, and politics, and having people from diverse groups in the room really does lead to those interesting conversations. If you just have one type of people in the room, you can end up in one lane. But if you do have that broad spectrum of opinion, lived experiences, etc., it can be valuable. And I do believe that ECOPs are fantastic at identifying what's needed for a holistic approach, which is, if you don't have ECOPs in the room to add their views on governance, you can't claim that's a truly holistic approach, because ECOPs haven't been evolved, and it's going to be ECOPs that have to carry the torch going forward as well. ECOPs are very effective at communicating with diverse stakeholders, like being early adopters for technology, also early adopters for various communication channels, TikTok being an example, reaching audiences you otherwise would have been able to do so. Building trust and fostering cooperation. I typically find that if you have messages being conveyed by early career people are more likely to take the messages on board as well, because they feel like you can have more balanced conversations, work together to build for the future. And as I said, if you don't have all the different stakeholders in the room building governance together, it's not going to be inclusive and it's not going to be holistic. That's why that representation is so essential. Drawing on my capacity development experience, I do feel like ECOPs are fantastic at developing materials around critical topics, because they are so important to us, because we're going to be the ones, as I said, dealing with them in the future. And I think another one I'd like to draw on is around, especially around the development of governance. We've been so lucky with this program over the past 5 weeks to hear from senior individuals, receive mentoring, and learn from the experience. But I also believe that mentoring can go both ways. Like, for instance, part of the conversations we've been having around the course is there's been a very keen desire from the lecturers to find out where we're thinking is how do we believe these issues can be tackled, and there's a real coming together there to deal with it. So just quickly, I think I'm taking their time. Incredibly passionate advocates for tackling these issues. We are going to be the stewards of the future. We want to influence the policy decisions and promote best practices. And as we're seeing increasingly in the press, we're very, very good at raising public awareness and mobilising support for ocean conservation as a whole. But there is still, as we've heard, so much work that needs to be done to build forward from where we are today. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Connor. You didn't want to make my job easy to distill your message, but I'm gonna try regardless. I think it's clear that no one can do it alone anymore. You need the communities, you need the creativity, definitely need the diversity of ideas and the representation, as you highlighted. And I think you both have already started building on the idea that we can bring creative and tangible solutions. and we can have progress, which brings me back to Ludovic. Could you share examples of successful trade-related policies that align economic incentives with sustainable ocean conservation and management? It would be great to hear how it was to put these ideas into practice, these projects. How did you get them off the ground, and how would you inspire other people to do similar projects?
Thank you. So I think one of the biggest achievements out there is the WTO Fishery Subsidies Agreement. And that's one key area where we can have economic incentives which lead to more sustainable conservation. UNCTAD is working really closely, and we hope to accompany developing economies to implement that agreement once it enters into force, because there's going to be a lot of need for funding and technical assistance to make this agreement implemented. That's one area. A second, so first point would be eliminating harmful subsidies or redirecting them towards more sustainable areas. Another key aspect would be certifications. At UNCTAD, we have had 2 projects in the Caribbean that were key in this regard: the Blue Barrier Trade project in the Caribbean and the Ocean Economy and Trade Strategies project in Barbados, Belize, and Costa Rica. So in both of those projects, we were working on helping developing economies in partnership with OETS, CITES, the EU, and other organizations, gain export markets by obtaining certifications. And those certifications were obtained by complying, for example, with CITES requirements, which are key to export, for example, to the EU, providing support on stock assessment, on identifying close seasons, fish quotas, etc. And here you can get both economic benefits and conservation by aiming for quality instead of quantity, because when you get certifications, producers get a higher value from their exports and they can access other export markets, especially as countries are implementing regulations, especially in the rich world, to ensure sustainability. And I have a short video. Hopefully we can present it afterwards on the project so that you can have a feel a bit of what it is in practice. And yeah, one third point, what I was mentioning at the beginning about the importance of ocean services, there's a real potential to move for especially small island developing states, but in general, to move from goods towards services which are achieved in a sustainable manner. And here there could be some coordination, for instance, with marine protected areas, where at the same time you protect ecosystems, and on the other time you promote sustainable kinds of tourism, which rely on the ecosystems to exist. And since, I'll just repeat again, 77%, no, that's the other stat, 85% of SIDS exports are services, and most of that is tourism. So that's where the real value is in terms of development. And do you have a tiny more time?
Yes, please.
Just to add on a note also, UNCTAD is organizing the Ocean Forum in March in preparation for the UN Ocean Conference in Nice. We haven't started communicating yet publicly on it, but the webpage is already up, and you can already inscribe or book yourself to attend. It would be a real pleasure for us to have you here and to have the voice of young professionals, because the recommendations of the UNCTAD Ocean Forum will be put into chair recommendations and sent to UNOC. So that's where you could share your voice and make your voice heard. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Ludovic. I think you've highlighted just how much work your organization puts into developing economies and SIDS. And I think this goes back right to the most basic ethos UNCTAD to create a leveled playing field overall, since we still have quite significant differences between the economic development of states. And yeah, I think you've highlighted a clear pathway where we can bring economic gains and continue as well to protect our oceans and to conserve our nature. Now, it's that was very inspiring to see, and I think it brings us back to Rosalind. From your perspective, how can initiatives like the Sustainable Ocean Alliance bridge the gap between local grassroots efforts and these larger policy frameworks that the other speakers have mentioned? And how would you, how can you, you've touched upon it in your first answer, but maybe you can expand a little bit more on how grant making can also assist with this.
So first, maybe I'll provide a little bit of an overview of SOA. It was created by youth for youth, and there's about 80 hubs all over the world. And SOA has its overall strategy based on these larger policy frameworks. We have impact areas, 5 impact areas, and these 5 impact areas essentially sort of fit in with these global frameworks. And that's kind of what we use to fund different projects. So that's ecosystems and species that can do with marine protected areas or restoration, greenhouse gas emissions, reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. There's blue foods, aquaculture, anything to improve blue foods. There's literacy, research, and outreach. And the last one is plastic pollution, prevention, recycling. So these are the main things that SOA focuses on, which these then go and fill into the larger policy frameworks. And based on this, for example, all of the grants and all of the things that they do, it's not anything specific. It could be policy, it could be research, it could be outreach, it could be education through these impact areas. So to answer your question then, for the grassroots projects, a lot of these times, young people in their own communities know what needs to happen. They just don't have the resources. And most of the time, the main resource is funding. As we know, this is one of the main things for effective implementation that is needed, it's funding. And SOA provides micro grants. So this is about less than $10,000. And a lot of these times, these grantees, when they're doing these projects, the projects that I mentioned before, it's unpaid. It's just completely volunteer, completely just trying to do something in your own local community. And so SOA kind of steps in by, number one, providing this platform for youth to be able to implement their own local initiatives. But besides that, they also offer a lot of other things, capacity building, so we can keep on building our capacity as youth in these topics. They also offer opportunities to go to conferences and to attend the COPs so that you can take your project and go talk about your project to these COPs, and then sort of maybe kind of giving a feedback loop, right? It's a two-way street where they're doing their local projects and they're going to these COPs and learning how the policy is being drafted. And at the same time, that policy is also guiding their work. So it's just this continual loop. And he's gone, but Alan earlier was talking about deep sea mining, and I wanted to kind of highlight that Sustainable Ocean Alliance has a massive, massive deep sea campaign, and that's done very well because of our broad reach, because we have youth everywhere who are speaking to their local communities, who are going locally, showing videos, educating, doing different types of arts to showcase what's needed. And that's a very small local thing, but then everyone is doing that. So overall, overarching, that's kind of how we connect it, taking these local projects within the overarching framework of these larger policies.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rosalind. Alan in the first chat rightly also mentioned that we've never had access to as much knowledge as we have today, which is overall, it's a great thing. But I think especially applying to younger people, it also brought sort of knowledge paralysis, if I can call it that, where we always feel that we don't know enough and we need to learn more. And that access facilitates that mentality. I think you've highlighted the most important way of escaping that, which is action.
Doing, yeah.
doing it. You'll never know everything you need to know, but you have to start somewhere.
I felt the opposite. I felt that you said that we have, or sorry, say what you said again.
That knowledge, the amount of knowledge brings a little bit of a paralysis mentality where we feel that we need to learn more and not always jump straight to action.
Yeah, I think the opposite in that, especially when I was writing my thesis of like, we already kind of know this stuff, right? We know, and most of it is using the precautionary principle. We already know this stuff, and you can always gain more knowledge, but at some point you have to kind of say, okay, I know the knowledge that I have is enough to start working.
Yes.
Yeah.
Basically, if supported, young people have the creativity to actually bring tangible change. Thank you. And now, Connor, I reserve a bit more time since you might be here. As someone who is about to graduate from the IY Malta training program, could you share your thoughts on the value that courses like this one and others bring to ECOPS? And also, how did this course prepare you for the pressing challenges that were mentioned in the first chat?
Thank you, Cosmin. Now, I think when it comes to capacity development, as you well know, obviously there's a broad spectrum of options. You have stuff as simple as just online reading materials. You have short webinars for an hour, but there is a critical space to be filled by programs such as this one, in terms of more long-form training, trying to condense materials into a shorter time span just to really uplift the level of knowledge and skills in the room. The in-depth understanding of ocean governance, the legal frameworks, policy development, societal principles, it cannot be overstated how important this is in terms of equipping ECOPS with the tools they need to tackle these challenges. It's only with an understanding of the ecosystem within which you operate can you work out which levers need to be pulled, which people you need to speak to, and what approaches will have the most effective impact. As I mentioned in my first answer, the learning around the latest technological advancements, the innovative approaches in ocean management, also crucial to make sure that you stay on the bleeding edge of things and make sure you stay ahead of the curve. The offering of insights into global best practices and the regional challenges we all face. One thing that has been so fantastic with this course is obviously looking at the 4 Cs from which the various participants come from, is showing what the best practices with each C, showing what the challenges are and how these can be applied to each other and which solutions may have potentially been overlooked elsewhere, and that you can then bring forward effectively as well. A bit more of a personal point, this one, but building the connections for life, friends for life, bringing people together, having experts in the room in their respective fields as peers, not only builds their friendships for the future, but also opens the door for essential collaborations that could be built together, both in the near future and the far future as well. And the hands-on training and the real-world experience in regards to the simulation exercises that we did were fantastic as well. Really showed how under time pressure and certain harder than maybe some would like circumstances, we can still operate to deliver. And as I mentioned in the first answer, like the fact that we all come from various disciplines, various lived experiences, various backgrounds, really gives the opportunity to build that complex, multifaceted approaches to tackling these ocean issues. Leadership skills, obviously we're not really going to get very far if we don't have at least some ocean leaders in the room to help us get there. These programs build confidence, they build leadership abilities, they're essential for driving forward the leaders of the future, if I do say so myself on behalf of the other participants. Becoming advocates, becoming better advocates in regards to critical issues around ocean conservation, sustainable management, in the respective communities. So taking the lessons we learn here today, taking it back to our communities and helping disseminate that knowledge amongst our peers, our friends, our local groups, all critical. These programs like this really do emphasize the importance of those integrated approaches, so not one-size-fits-all program that combines the science, the policy, and community engagement, teaches the adaptive management strategies to deal with them, so how do you tackle in the right way. And with a better understanding of how to build the policy, as I said, to open this answer, you have the tools and the knowledge necessary to promote and influence the development of policies that promote the sustainable use of our collective ocean resources. But in addition, yeah, I'd say on a personal note, the knowledge is fantastic, the learning is fantastic, the tools are fantastic. It's the connections, in my mind, that you build with friends for the future that is most essential.
I think all discussions lead back to community.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Thank you very much, Connor, Rosalind, Ludovic. We've covered a lot of ground today, from trade policies to grassroots movements and capacity development. Could I ask you for one last quick statement to sum up your messages, Ludovic?
Yes, I think you'll see that also in the video if we have time. We can't do only conservation, we have to do sustainable use because there's livelihoods that depend on the ocean economy. And that's why there's such a need to find solutions that combine economic opportunity and sustainable development and environmental protection. If we only focus on environmental protection, we'll leave the poor behind, and it makes sense why they have their own incentives, and it's for them to, they need to find solutions too, and we're here to help them, if that makes sense. That's the mission of UNCTAD, aligning development and environmental protection, at least in our team.
I would say to just do something and start small. I think when it comes to a lot of conservationists or young people, it always starts with beach cleanups, and then you sort of grow and get better and learn more. And I think to really build community and to build those connections, to just start somewhere and make small changes, and slowly the ball starts rolling.
We are facing some truly gargantuan challenges, but they are not unassailable. Rome wasn't built in a day, but with enough people, it could be.
Well, I could add that Rome could have been destroyed in a day. Let's not get.
I prefer taking the optimistic approach.
Yeah, let's finish it on an optimistic note then. Thank you very much. Now, I am going to need a few minutes to prepare the clip that Ludovic mentioned. I think we can take one from the room. We made other invites that.
Yes, okay, thank you. So I'm going to step in very, very briefly as moderator for the very last second while Cosmin does his technical magic. I think we have an opportunity for one, maximum 2 questions from the room if we're quick. If I may, other questions? Right? I think there might have been something from online. Okay. In a sense, some of this question has already been answered by you, Rosalind, but I would really like to revisit this. We have a question from someone who's following us online. How important do you think educating youth on ocean issues is in the fight for climate change, but I imagine fight in climate change? And can you point out some noteworthy examples of efforts being made? I know the question focuses on climate change, but I think we can expand your answers to include other areas as well.
I think it goes far beyond youth. I think everyone kind of needs to be educated on these topics. I think when I think of, all of these negotiations that are going on, most people have no idea that deep sea mining is currently being negotiated. How many people are aware of that? I think it goes beyond youth. Of course, I think youth right now are in school or learning or are pursuing these things, but I think common people just have been so far removed from what policy is, that I think the education really spans to everyone. And I think youth can help spread that. I think that's what a lot of youth do, is education, awareness, outreach. So yes, to train youth first to be able to then go on and do that. But overall, I think really the education really needs to span past youth to younger kids, to older kids, to people, to adults.
Okay. Do you want to add something, Connor?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I may have mentioned it in my first answer there, but I think for me is if you don't educate the next generation, then who's going to carry the flag forward? Which is, you need to build for the future, not just in the short term, but the long term. And education is quite literally the bedrock of that, because without that, everything else falls.
I know you create a lot of information, not just data, also information at UNCTAD. So I know you also do a lot of outreach in that respect, maybe focusing more on policymakers who might be your targeted audience. But I can really understand your points that you've made about, maybe in shorthand, we can call it a little bit increasing literacy, right? Increasing literacy. Something I think you might have noticed as well, Ludwig, because you work in a very particular institution, is maybe the need for literacy, climate and ocean, even among decision makers who might themselves be very expert, be very proficient and competent in their fields, but might benefit a bit from some literacy in adjacent.
That's true. Just like 2 points that were raised by Abigail and Alan. In terms of, first, Alan was saying the importance of educating not only youth, but the entire generations, because as youth, we are also quite influenced as young people by our elders. So if we go home and our elders are telling us this is not happening, it's quite difficult to pass a message. You have to do more research, more soul searching to find your own convictions. Or then if you can have some support at home and some support from the current generations of leaders, because the climate crisis is happening right now.
Yes.
So action has to be happening right now. Yes, that's the first point. And then to the point raised by Abigail, UNCTAD does a lot of technical assistance, especially to small island developing states and to developing economies, because there's a need for knowledge and there's limited resources. And that's where we play a key role. And that was a point raised by Abigail. So Malta is a high-income economy, but it's a small island. So there's always some resource constraints. And that's why UNCTAD is trying to support here.
Thank you very much for your answers to this question. Cosmin is making a signal that we're ready for the video. So I invite you to launch it.
I think there should be sound.
The OETS to assist and support developing countries to better understand and analyze what ocean-based economic sectors we have out there and how we can enhance and strengthen those sectors while ensuring that sustainability factor is also considered. The OETS project has 3 phases, the first being assessment and formulation. The second being validation. And the third being dissemination.
There is sustainable development, as economic development, social development, and environmental. In addition to that, governance as well as the need for scientific research are identified as critical. In terms of governance, we've already signed on to all of the major conventions that relate to the management and conservation of fisheries resources. For example, the United Nations Convention of the Sea.
Knowledge exchange was a key part of the OETS project. We cannot speak about managing a natural resource without local knowledge. It is one of the underlying pillars that has been able to build the capacity at the local level.
Uno de los factores más importantes para lograr un desarrollo sostenible es el que se trabaje al lado de los pescadores. The goal really is for us to add value to our stable, commercially important products. We also have multi-species finfish management plan.
La marca colectiva que se ha diseñado en conjunto para efectos de demostrar transparencia, equidad, trazabilidad, el desempeño social y ambiental que esto podría generar a todas las comunidades costeras y acuicultores.
The full implementation of the OETS project can lead to Barbados, particularly as a small island developing state, accessing large international markets that it doesn't currently access.
Challenges. We don't have the kind of resources. We don't have the infrastructure. We also have limitations in terms of capacity. Additionally, we're people who have been using the resources and we want to be able to continue to do that.
Thank you very much, Ludovic, for sharing this with us. Thank you, Rosalind, as well, and Kamer. And hopefully we'll meet on the fringes of the next events.
Yes.
Thank you. With this, I'll give the floor back to Antonella.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your interventions, the speakers on this panel. The speakers on this panel and the speakers on the previous panel, I know that I certainly have learned a lot. And now, because this is, as well as a seminar in its own right, this is also an important opportunity for the soon-to-be graduates of the International Ocean Institute's training program on ocean governance in the Mediterranean, Black, Baltic, and Caspian Seas. I know that the training director, Almi Bahnan, is going to be very, very pleased to introduce two speakers from the class. You have it. Okay. So I'll do it. So two speakers from the class will give us a brief message on behalf of the class. So please, I invite Aibuke Uishal and Jinping Wang to come and give us the class message on this event of the seminar, and also it's your graduation day, so congratulations as well. Please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aybüke. And first, I would like to thank everyone here who made this amazing experience possible. We have a little message from in behalf of our class. Clock is ticking. Nature is at a breaking point, and so are we. What we choose to do today will define the future of generations yet to come. As representatives of the IOI class 2024, we stand before you with a pressing message. The time for discussions and delays are over. The world's ocean, the very lifeblood of our planet, are under siege. The threats of habitat destruction, overfishing, pollution, and climate change are no longer distant warnings. They are present realities. If we do not act swiftly and decisively, the legacy we leave behind will be a barren ocean and a planet devoid of the vibrant life we once took for granted. Ocean conservation is not just an environmental issue. It's a societal imperative. To protect the biodiversity and ecosystems that sustain us, we must ensure that nature is no longer treated as an endless resource, but as a fragile treasure. Urgent measures are needed to reverse the damage already done. Education, both academic and public, is a cornerstone of this transformation. We must foster a deeper connection between humanity and the oceans by integrating ocean literacy into educational curricula across the globe. Public education, such as community-driven projects and immersive experiences, can inspire collective ownership of marine conservation. Young people, in particular, hold the key to this shift. Empowering the next generation with the knowledge and the tools to act as ocean stewards is our responsibility, and it is their right.
However, no single nation, organization, or generation can achieve this alone. Oceans do not recognize borders, and neither should our efforts. We urge global policymakers to adopt integrated cross-border initiatives that prioritize marine ecosystem restoration. By addressing biodiversity loss and habitat degradation, we also strengthen our resilience against the broader impacts of climate change. Achieving these goals requires collective commitment and immediate actions. As custodians of the planet, it is time to realign our policies, economies, and daily practices to protect what remains of our natural heritage. The oceans are not infinite, and time is not on our side. In conclusion, we sincerely urge you to join us in championing the urgent protection of our planet. The solutions exist. What is needed now is the will to implement them. Let us not leave the next generation a world that is a shadow of what it could have been. Instead, let us give them the chance to thrive, surrounded by the beauty and abundance that nature has always promised. Together, we can turn the tide. Thank you.
I will assure you that we will see to it that your message is received by the Secretary General of the UN through one of his assistants, Mr. Wynne, who has already been warned about that. And we would also like to ask you kindly to see this message reaches the Director of Trade in Ankara. And I'd say one thing, I didn't change one word from the draft that I received, not one word. Celine? Sorry,
We take a moment as well. Auni, you can join me to thank all of you, ECOPS, IY alumni who joined us online. And we look forward to seeing you to our next one, which is going to be in March and the first quarter of 2025. Thank you very much. We're sorry we didn't have time to take any questions. We saw some really interesting questions on Teams, but we'll try to put them in the next webinar. So thank you very much.